This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
At LinkedIn, we know hiring is a big deal for your small business. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming. LinkedIn uses data that you can't find anywhere else to give you the best candidates, all so you can feel confident you're hiring the best person for the job. And even a little hiring bliss. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
Hello there, Stanley Carr here. You know, I love collecting music and sports memorabilia. Want to know where you can find some? I'll tell you. Go to oldglory.com. This website features one-of-a-kind apparel from your favorite sports teams and musical artists. And I can help you get 15% off of all items. Use the code WWH135. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show. And with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He is a journalist, writer, and historian. I'm pleased to welcome the one and only Oliver Bateman to the show. Welcome, Oliver, to Wrestling with Heart.
Hey, Stanley, glad to be on.
All right, it's my pleasure. So talk to me about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
So I am from southwestern Pennsylvania, grew up there first 7 years of my life, and then came down to eastern North Carolina, moved down there with my parents in 89. So 89 was really when I became a big Jim Crockett Promotions / WCW fan, living in eastern North Carolina. That was, there was the big divide between promotions at the time, and most of the kids that I knew down there were watching WCW. I began to watch there on TBS and liked it because you got the longer matches, you got the bigger shows, you got all that stuff. So that was really like my childhood. And a lot of my childhood, I was homeschooled, so a lot of my childhood was spent going to work with my dad and reading wrestling magazines, and I'd bring a stack of them with me some days, work my way through. And that was always, that was very much like a part of my school curriculum for many, many years.
Wow, school curriculum.
That wrestling, as long as I could make some argument about why I was going to have some benefit from it someday, my mom and dad had no problem with me just plowing through wrestling materials all day long. And given that I writing about it and curating the history of and doing historical work in is something I do now with it, I think there was a benefit. So there was a payoff to them letting me do that.
Yeah, this was like really, in the 80s where you had your WCWs, your Crockett's, your WWF, and all these different promotions, really just so much content. And you were able to, like you said, this was like the South had like so much going on in terms of promotions. You had, Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, your Funks, your Briscoes, and so many different talents that came through that part of the country.
So 89, 90, 91 in that area. It would change a little bit in 92, 93, 94 as the promotion tried to promote different areas. But once or twice a year, we would go to a show at Norfolk or Hampton Roads, or because we were about an hour from Elizabeth City, so that was in that metro, and so you could still see a WCW show really cheaply. And they didn't draw all that well during that period, 90 especially. I don't think they were drawing that well. So my dad could pick up tickets like promotionally, from someone else that he worked with, or it's not like they were really doing huge gates at a lot of places. That said, the crowds that were there were really animated, really liked the wrestlers, but it was unique. 88, 89, 90, 91 was also another period where it's different today. Everybody can watch every sort of wrestling thing. They can learn about every wrestling thing. Um, 87, 88, 89, as I'm growing up, we're watching the WWF stuff in the mornings. We might occasionally watch a VHS tape of a WrestleMania after it happened. Um, but that stuff, I wasn't as passionate about it as I would become about WCW. Especially 89 was an incredible year in ring for that promotion. 89, you had Great Muta, you had Sting, you had all these people in their primes. You had the Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair stuff that year, and it was a great year to be a fan of that promotion. So big part of my childhood. And I would say ultimately I'm a Southern wrestling fan at heart. I wrote a thing about this when Dick Slater died for The Ringer, talking about how this was kind of like old wrestling to me. So that was me. That was what I was growing up with.
Yeah, me, I'm like a big like Tennessee, being from Tennessee, like I
Okay.
love like the Memphis stuff and
Yeah.
the Nashville Goulas
Yeah.
Welch,
Yeah.
Jarrett, like that's like my jam. So
Yeah.
anytime I get to watch some of those clips, I'm like, this is so fascinating. This is so cool. Tojo Yamamoto and Jackie
Yeah.
Fargo and
Yeah.
Lawler, all these guys like back then, like it was different. It's not like today where it's like the glitz and the glamour. This was very like old school studio.
Yeah.
Lights are dimmed,
Yep.
very, dark, gritty atmosphere. And you're watching this and you're going, wow, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, it's great stuff for the time. And like, I mean, Memphis was a place that was just, was able to promote wrestling for a long time. That territory lasted for a long time into the early 90s and the mid 90s when Jerry Lawler was on WBF TV. They were still running it. And that Mid-South Coliseum, that like they were able to draw that and fill that. And yeah, I mean, probably the wrestling town, I would guess. I mean, I was privileged to do with the help of images from Mark James, the wrestling historian from that area, and Natalie Bell, who's the daughter of Sputnik Monroe. I did a Sputnik Monroe piece for a place a long time ago that was really multimedia, and that was fun to do. And you could see, I mean, that was. He wasn't only in Memphis, but that was the main circuit that really provided for those kids because his other son was in the story, and I enjoyed doing it. I mean, not the stuff that I was really like the closest to me growing up, but as I dug back into it, I was like, man, you could see how passionate people were about this stuff. Yeah, and it's dimmed lights. It's not the kind of like snap cuts like you would see today. But man, like when it was the interviews, the promotions, there was a rawness and a grittiness, not necessarily real. It didn't seem real, but like just a real, just such a grittiness and such a excitement to it. You could see why people loved Jerry Lawler. I mean, what a character.
Oh, definitely. And what I like about Sputnik Monroe, and I've read stories about, his career, such a cool guy and humanitarian, like was able to, stand up for African Americans
Yep.
and try to break those barriers so that they could attend the shows. And it really like almost like was a champion for the civil rights era.
Yeah, and able to build it into the storyline so that he could make some money. And when was working with somebody like Norvell Austin or someone like that, they could make some money, you know. And so was able to do a lot of good especially in an area that needed that kind of stuff. And also, manage the bottom line as a pro wrestler because he didn't make a ton of money in that era, but he had years of making good money, and that was it's good for his family. His daughter's a registered nurse now, so was able to provide for them for a time. And I'm just glad, glad the name rings out. He didn't get into the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame newsletter, this time around, but maybe next time.
Yes. Now, back to you and your journey in the wrestling business. Talk to me about some of your favorite wrestlers that you enjoyed watching growing up.
One of the interesting things is I've gotten to write at the Ringer. I write these long obituaries, sometimes with the help of somebody that was on your show before. Ian Douglas is a great writer as well and has a great network of contacts. And it's interesting that I've been able to write the obituaries of some of my favorites. Like I love Paul, Mr. Wonderful Orndorff, and with Ian's help, I was able to, when Paul died, write that obituary with the inclusion of, I'm interviewing his best friend, Brian Blair, for the piece, like not long after Paul dies. And so that voice is in there. All these news articles about Paul are in there. I like Paul because here is this college athlete, great physique, WWF, the big stories, and then WCW later in his career, tough guy, just incredibly legitimate, and got to cover him. Somebody that always appealed to me on WCW TV, and I know was a more controversial figure. People didn't like him. It kind of reminded me of my own father, so I was always sort of drawn to him one way or the other. I wrote the obituary for Ole Anderson down in that area, and Ole, great mind for the business, very hard to work with for a lot of people, but great at a time in the business. And even when I was watching him in 89 and 90, and I got to see him live in 1990, just in kind of like a managerial type role, just walking to the ring. I was always impressed by him. I mean, he had some presence. He had great mic skills, and he was not polished in any kind of way that the guys are today. But guys like Ole and Art Anderson and all of that, that style, you see it in groups today like FTR that try to come out to the ring and sort of do that style. Admittedly, it's not the same because they're very aware of what they're doing. But yeah, I loved Ole Anderson. I love Dynamite Kid. I love the British Bulldogs in general, and I got to write Dynamite Kid's obituary for the Ringer. Dynamite, crippled for the sport, but was the guy that really, I think, gave us the, along with Misawa in Japan, gave us like the Dave Meltzer style of wrestling, which is just so hard hitting, snapping, cracking. I mean, Chris Benoit is probably the other guy that, not one of my favorites, but Dynamite Kid definitely was, even though I later realized that I had to go back into the tapes and everything else. What I saw of Dynamite Kid in 87, 88, 89 was not the best Dynamite Kid, right? Like, so I was seeing, and I love the British Bulldog, David Boy Smith as well, but I wasn't seeing the best of, certainly wasn't seeing the best of Dynamite. And even David Boy was better earlier in his career when he was a little smaller. So there was a whole lot, there's whole lots of like favorites, but for me, Stanley, the weird one is when, you get the assignment and you're going to write them up, and you can try to do a really good job. And something I always try to do is add a little bit of extra value. Like with Ole, in Ole's autobiography that Scott Teal helped him with, he talks about playing college football, but there's no pictures of it, no records. But I was able in Ole's obit to go in and find that he had indeed played on the Colorado University Buffaloes football team. Put that picture in there. It's in his Wikipedia now linked, so like you can see. Like the really bloody wrestler New Jack, he claims in his autobiography he played at Clark University, Atlanta college football, and I was like, New Jack, he didn't seem athletic to me at all. But Ian Douglas and I looked it up, and Ian was like, no, here's all these records of this dude scoring a touchdown, playing cornerback, returning this, doing that. And the crazy story about this, you want to talk about charity work and stuff. When that obituary came out, when New Jack died, the woman he was married to messaged me on Instagram and said, thank you for finding this football stuff related to him. Like, this had always been special to him, this period of his life, a couple of years when he was playing college football. You wouldn't think, because, you think wrestling is the main thing. But we didn't have any of those. And he talked about it. And so all it was going into newspapers.com and digging up the footage, like digging up the material. But when you have the spouse of the person who just died messaging you, to me, that's part of the giving back part of the business. Oh, and my favorite one of all, and it was a real labor of love. When I was a university professor at the University of Texas at Arlington, we came across some photos, and a friend of mine, Melissa Gonzalez, the archival librarian at the school there. He said, "Oh, look at these old pictures, Oliver. These are just a box. They're stored and they're safely stored. But look, it's wrestling." So we looked at it, and sure enough, it's these incredible black and white 1983 photos of wrestling just as it was about to peak in the Dallas area. This is all at the Will Rogers Center in Fort Worth. And it's all the fans at ringside and these incredible back of the body views of the wrestlers. And it was the photographer was a guy named Cyrus Bono, who was an incredible photographer, mainly jazz musicians and clubs and real estate. But for a while he got into taking pictures of wrestling. And what made it super exciting for him was he got to show the crowd interaction. So what I was able to do is take those. The library supported me at Texas Arlington. We did a huge exhibit for wrestling, world-class championship wrestling memories at the Will Rogers Center. And the craziest thing was this is a library exhibit in the nice special collections wing of a library, but it's on the top floor. You got to take the elevator up. It drew hundreds and hundreds and eventually thousands of people over the couple months it ran, of these locals who felt passionate about it. Because when it came out, that first night that I had photos, I went on Twitter. This was 2015, so he was still on there and active. And I'd sent one over to, just to see Kevin Von Erich. I was like, "Kevin, have you, can you help me identify some of the people in these pictures?" Now, Kevin has seen every photo of his family ever taken, because he's the mags. Mm-hmm. The magazines would come and he knows, or they would pose them and he knows that's what he looked like in here. But he saw some there. He'd never seen these before, never knew they existed. These are all, in particular, him and Carrie, or him and David, and they look incredible. 83, they look incredible. And here's these memories, and he's like, "Oh yeah, they're pointing at these girls in the crowd, and I remember them." And you can see the girls holding programs up for him to sign, and he's like, "Oh, I remember that night." And so I'm talking to him, and then some of the other wrestlers, Johnny Mantell, Iceman King Parsons. They would look at these photos and "Man, I look good there." Johnny Mantell came and helped curate the exhibit, helped, sat down in special collections and identified some of the wrestlers. And then there's a website for it still. So people search Ringside UTA Oliver Bateman. They can see some of the photos from the collection, the ones that hung up on the wall. And it tells them how to go there if they want to see the other hundreds and hundreds of photos that are sitting in a box that we identified. And so that's real charitable work that I couldn't believe. The ring announcer, Mark Lowrance, who's now a pastor, hadn't wanted to come out, but he came out and gave the big talk the night of the event. We did the formal kickoff of it. There must have been 150 people that came to watch us talk about wrestling in this kind of academic way and have this dinner with us. And that, to me, 2015, got on NPR. It got on national NPR. Because it was just kicking up the right places at that time. The photos have been used in books by Greg Oliver and other people after that. They're all over the place now. And to me, that's the essence of public service in wrestling, where all this stuff I'm talking about here, I feel you don't become super rich doing this or anything, but you get to give back, and you're giving back to the business. And it's just so interesting to see the guys go, "Oh, I didn't remember this piece of history," or they're excited to come back out for one more hurrah, or to talk about it one more time, or just to connect with the fans one more time.
Exactly. And what you're doing is you're preserving history that young fans might not really recognize or know about. And you're bringing this in a whole new light now. People know about stars from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, before the Hulk Hogans and the Ric Flairs, going back. I was good friends with a wrestler named Len Rossi out of Nashville.
Yeah.
And I had helped run this Facebook page for him and for his wrestling career. And I remember, he has since unfortunately passed away, but I would go see him quite often at his old.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Health food store where he worked. And so he would often talk about this article in the local newspaper about him challenging Muhammad Ali to a fight back when he was Cassius Clay. So years go by, Muhammad Ali passes away, and I had been looking for this article, and all of a sudden, just a couple of days after Muhammad Ali's gone, I just see this article that Len referred me to and was talking about, and so I was like, "Oh my gosh, this must be it. This must be the one that Len was referring to." So it took me a long time to track it down and find it, so I made a copy of it. I gave it to Len, and he was just blown away by that.
A lot of these guys have that kind of history. Like you wouldn't, I mean, like Len's a regional star, known regionally, very well known regionally, and you'll hear them. They'll all tell these kind of stories. When part of you, they know at this point, like they probably think, well, this kid probably thinks I'm just BSing him, because this is a big star. How could I have ever had this happen? And then, sure enough, here's that piece that confirms it. Like when Paul Orndorff died. While Brian Blair was telling me the story of like Paul Orndorff fighting off 7 cops in a bar in Tampa, I'm sent a text from Ian Douglas, and it's another newspaper article for the story, and it is the arrest of Paul Orndorff for fighting 7 cops with his brother in a restaurant. And Brian is telling it like it's like a tall tale, like it's like a story, and he doesn't quite, he knows that it's true and it happened because he's from Tampa, but like he's probably telling it like it's like just like a myth at this point. And so I'm able to send it to Brian, and he goes, "Oh my God," because it's his friend, and it like you as you get older, I guess you think you're telling. What did you say? You almost think you feel like you're telling lies when you're telling them that that's how it happened, and then something comes up where you see that part of the record, and watching them react to that is really special. And so I love that as a historian. I love that. I love that the business, even if the guys had their ups and downs in their careers, to interact with Muhammad Ali or to do some other fun stuff, amazing things, right? Like that's still a highlight of somebody's life. It's awesome.
Exactly. It's just, who'd have thought like that would happen, out of the blue. And, yeah, I helped run the page. It's still up on Facebook, and if people want to check that out. But do you remember the first article you wrote, like wrestling article that you wrote?
The first article that I wrote that really got me, like the first one that really got me brought into the ecosystem as a writer, where I would go on to write about it in like the Atlantic and the Paris Review and all over the place on pro wrestling. I mean, it's the craziest thing. I wrote a thing for Al Jazeera America in 2014, right after the Ultimate Warrior died. And it was about how there were still a lot of labor problems in the WWE and how there was still a real male-female talent divide. And I looked at some litigation that had happened. I looked at some things that had filed, and just kind of made the argument. It was a long, like, analytical piece. Like, here's some of the problems in the sport, and, here's some of the things that might have contributed to Jim Hellwig dying. And that piece made a pretty big splash. But most importantly, it connected me with David Shoemaker, who has been my editor at Ringer since 2017 when I started doing the obits there. And at the time flies, that's been 8 years. But in 2014, David and I then helped with a piece that ran in a magazine called Jacobin that was called Money in the Bank, and we're both mentioned and thanked in there. It was all about like the labor history of pro wrestling, and it's really good by a guy named Dan O'Sullivan, and it got picked up in Best American Sports Writing 2015. I was supposed to come on at Grantland, which was the old publication before the Ringer closed, and maybe start doing some wrestling writing. There was a period where Grantland was sort of like ending, and that those people were all starting something called the Ringer. And finally in 2017, when Vader died, Big Van Vader died, and David didn't have the bandwidth to do anything himself. He asked me, he said, this is a good time. Do you want to come in and start writing? And so most of what I've written there have been obituaries, and each one has kind of gotten deeper and deeper and deeper until when Hulk Hogan died, and we had all these different people in the story, Brian Blair and Steve Kern, all these people that Ian and I knew are in, and who knew Hulk really, really well, are in this thing that's 8,000 words long. That was written in one night.
Wow.
Because we kind of have a lot of stuff ready to go, and we hear, so and so's sick or so and so's, not ready to go, and but I brought Ian on in 2022 to do the Antonio Inoki obit because Ian knows Japanese wrestling really well. So I was like, that's my chance to bring him on. And he's done stuff by himself there, and he's done stuff with me. But we were always focused with these obits on getting this kind of full story out quickly. And it all grew out the wrestling wise, like all the wrestling writing grew out from that Al Jazeera piece. And I had done some like blogs and smaller magazine articles for places like Vice, but it was that Al Jazeera America article on really like the kind of labor challenges and labor problems that blew up. And I think it also even got a reaction from the WWE because there was, I know that the second piece, the Money in the Bank piece that I'm just quoted in, had that kind of reaction because labor conditions and pay really increased between like 2014 and like 2018, 19. So that was the one that really got me going. And I've been writing lots of other things, primarily stuff in like my main area, which is like legal history and culture writing. But I always wanted to cover wrestling, and that chance to do that article on, that a friend of mine who was the editor at Al Jazeera America was like, we'll give you 2,000 words. You can do it this here. And again, it's kind of a more negative look than the obituaries are not really negative. When I write them about the guys, it's always, doesn't matter who the guy is. I try to frame it really positively because some of these guys are kind of controversial. Like some people didn't like New Jack and some people didn't like Sabu and some people didn't. But I try to focus on what the positive parts of the legacy are. And also, what are some stories I can confirm on the record? So like when Scott Hall died, I was able to go back into the record and find everybody knows Scott Hall killed somebody. In the early 80s, Scott Hall, early in his career, was cheating on, or not, he wasn't cheating, but a woman was seeing him who was married. And he was very worried that her husband was going to kill him. So, he goes to the club one night. He's this huge dude. Scott Hall's huge. Mm-hmm. So the guy is no joke, though. And so they get in a fight, and Scott Hall ends up killing him. But the craziest thing was 1 or 2 months before, and Scott Hall would have known this, the guy that killed him was freed by a Florida court after killing a guy who had been messing with his wife,
wow,
the same woman. So this guy had literally killed another man for doing exactly. So he was literally planning to kill Scott Hall. So people would say, oh, Scott Hall was a murderer. No, Scott Hall, not only did Scott Hall get off by the Florida court, Scott Hall killed a guy who was a murderer. And I don't know if that ever got back to the Hall family or they ever found out about it. That is the weirdest angle. That was a dangerous man. And you could tell what a tough guy Scott Hall is to have. I mean, just some of those people lived in some pretty tough situations, but that Florida bar scene was pretty brutal.
Well, Scott had such an amazing career, was able to really have a career in the WWE and WCW, and of course, this whole thing with the NWO really took off, and remarkable career that he had. Still somebody that we miss to this day. Now, outside of wrestling and doing what you've been able to do with preserving the history, I know you've been involved with doing other things in your community as well. Tell me about those endeavors.
Yeah. I mean, all through my 20s, I volunteered in mental health settings or worked in mental health settings when I was going to graduate school. So I worked in a group home where I cared for adults who were a little bit more, they needed a lot more care. They couldn't have female staff. They were what you might call them dangerous. And I would take them to events, and I would take them, we'd go see Notre Dame football games, and we'd go see, all kinds of other sporting events. And you'd get them out and about in a way that they needed very specific, therapeutic staff support was my job. And they needed very specific care, very specific people who could handle them. And I really, I keep up with some of those families to this day. And my wife is a therapist, and so therapy work is just an important thing. Everybody, if they need it, should be doing it. But even today here in Pittsburgh, I'm active in the community in terms of uh, it's a lot of things I do as a writer where I'm trying to publicize causes, or I write for the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, but almost for no pay, mainly just to highlight local issues, in print. I mean, it's good to be in print, but maybe, highlight local issues like with the public schools and challenges in politics. And I'm always volunteering time. Like I volunteered a lot of time to the mayor that just got elected in the last campaign, and doing a big profile of him for a magazine. I mean, that wasn't just like I want to profile him for a story. It's like I think he's going to be the better choice for the city going forward. So I mean, I'm really active in terms of anything that I think is going to make a difference. And even though some of it can relate back into my writing career, there are things that I'll do for no money, like go give a talk at an event that I think is important, or a historical society that I think is really important. I see this as an important part of the public service. Or when Ian is doing all of his preservation efforts on Black wrestling in the United States and stuff, I will just devote unpaid time and effort to making sure those books are clean and edited, and they're designed well, and they're really readable, because I think that history, he's one of the best in the game in getting that history out. He's gonna have 3 books out, right? Mm-hmm. The next last like 14 months or something, because there's this special project on the horizon that people will see one day. But there's this stuff coming out. I'll devote time and energy to covering it, because I want this, again, like it's stuff that will linger, and maybe somebody else will pick it up one day, and maybe it'll inspire them to do something. But yeah, I mean, as a writer and somebody that can have a little bit of influence, I think it's important. Just like wrestlers will give back, there are ways that I can give back. They can kind of magnify certain causes or people or things that are important.
What causes do you feel are near and dear to your heart?
I mean, right now, to me, the biggest thing that I'm involved with in trying to sort of push reform for, or trying to figure out with other parents and with local politicians and advocacy groups, and is what to do about the future of the Pittsburgh public schools, because student enrollment dropped from 40,000 kids at the beginning of COVID to about 20,000 now, and it's projected to drop to 10 or 12,000 in another 5 years. That's not sustainable for the future of a city where you're raising a daughter. And, we don't really have any solutions yet. Some ideas, maybe better ways for parents to manage, sick leave, or better ways to manage. COVID was really kind of botched by the schools here, so a lot of parents left. But if more parents leave, or the system continues to lose people, there won't be a city anymore for any of us. And so right now, that's probably the cause that's the most immediate. That I like when I talked to the mayor on Monday. Like, to me, a lot of my questions are going to be about education, things we could potentially do about education. And if 5 years down the line, if the stuff's not resolved, we're not going to have this big city. At least it's it's big. It's along the lines of like Memphis or something. Like, it's big in that sense. It's not huge, but yeah, I mean, so right now education is front and center.
Was there a particular event that you were involved with, as far as like being involved with a school event or something, that was heartwarming for you?
Oh, the biggest event for me that was totally set up and developed was that world-class championship archival photo exhibit. I've never seen so many people come together. Nobody, there's no profit made out of any of that at all, right? Nobody made anything out of it. It was just this group of community coming together. I mean, moms, dads, dragging their kids to this thing, just out of a sheer love of the sport. And probably the most amazing thing I saw during my time living in Dallas for those 4 years was just the love and the nostalgia and the affection that people had for that sport. That was the most heartwarming thing that I've done. And the friendships I made with the people who are like, I can't believe you have these records, or you found these. They go on to this day, and they've been people I've worked into articles and everything.
What is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
I think for me as a historian, it's knowing that I'm preserving something. And even like, right now working on the education stuff in Pittsburgh, it's only about preserving the future, right? So I like want to conserve what we have and preserve what we have. Otherwise, there won't be anything to preserve or conserve in the future. And the same goes for wrestling. Like, if you don't grab some of these records or help these people pull their stuff together, and anybody that helps one of these old guys do a podcast, or some of your listeners, and some of the people are doing things like that. If you weren't doing that, that stuff would just be lost. So that's public service too, and it's honestly probably making somebody's day, and it's probably making people's lives a little bit better or a lot better in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, just think about how many of the shows, from years gone by have been lost due to being in a fire or recycled for some reason. But now it's like with YouTube or with the internet, you can find old clippings of things. It's way more accessible now than it used to be.
Yeah, and it might be that somebody, somebody looking into it, or a kid, or somebody that was a fan can see, well, that was the first thing I was at, or that's a show I remembered, but I never had any proof it existed. And there you go. There's a piece of the past right there.
Exactly. Well, Oliver, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. It means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. Thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you on social media? And if there's anything you want to plug, feel free.
Yeah. People looking to learn more about me can go to my website, oliverbateman.com. They can punch into their Google search bar, Oliver Bateman Does the Work, which is my Substack, and subscribe. It's free. It's a lot of articles about all the different stuff I cover. And then I'm on Twitter as Mustache Club US. And so that's my really only social. And I'm on Facebook, but mainly just with my family. But I think people should check all that out. And I think it's a great way to do a show like this where you can talk about, charitable work or importance of historical work like this. So I'm glad I know we went back and forth, but I'm glad we set this up and got this done.
I'm so glad we were able to connect, and I want to say thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.